Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altmann, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Henry Jenkins, the Peter de Flores Professor of Humanities and Director of the Comparative Media Studies program at MIT. He is the author or editor of 12 books on various aspects of media and popular culture. His latest books include Convergence Culture, Where Old and New Media Collide, Fans, Bloggers, and Gamers, Media Consumers in a Digital Age, and The Wow Climax, Tracing the Emotional Impact of Popular Culture. Henry is a prolific blogger, writing regularly about how digital technologies are reshaping culture, including politics, education, and religion. Described by a colleague as the embodiment of, quote, principled antic behavior, unquote, Jenkins calls himself an ACA fan who boldly goes where no humanist has gone before. Henry Jenkins is visiting the UO as the first of two 2008-2009 OâFallon lecturers. On November 3rd, he gave a talk entitled Talking Snowmen, Moose Stew, and the 3 a.m. Girl, New Media, Popular Culture, and American Politics, 2008. Welcome, Henry. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Happy to be here.
I wanted to start with your self-description as an ACA fan, which also is prominently posted as one of the titles of your blog. Can you define what that is, please?
Sure, it's a word that I coined to refer to sort of hybrid identity between that of the academic and that of the fan. When I entered the academic world, most people in media studies wanted to hold fans at arm's length, and there was a sense that you could be an academic or you could be a fan. But I was drawn toward the academic world of media studies by my passions and engagements as a fan, and I wanted a way to proclaim that, to reclaim it, to sort of insist that those were not opposed terms. That I know many fans who are among the best scholars of popular culture. And I know many scholars who, whether openly or in the closet, are fans of the media which they study. It would not be unusual in Shakespeare studies to say that you liked Shakespeare. So it seemed to me odd that it was sort of almost verboten in media studies to claim to like the television shows that you wrote about. And so part of what I've tried to do over the last 20 years is to push to acknowledge the emotional stakes we have in the culture we study, and to encourage other young academics to feel much more comfortable in their status as fans. And so there's now an army of ACAFin out there who are sort of proudly bear that label as a way of positioning themselves in the field.
One of the things I assume you're trying to do is blow a big hole in that disdain that academics tends to have for popular culture?
No, I think it's the disdain and the sense of holding the audience at a distance, of sort of treating them as others. I mean, I'm trying to do for our relations to popular culture what feminism has done, what queer studies has done, what a number of other fields have done, to sort of say that our subjective experiences, who we are and how we know what we know, is a central part of our field of study. And that you can't really understand what popular culture is unless you feel its effects, unless you're engaged with it in a level that suggests some passion. Now that passion can be, you can be angry at some media that you've seen. You may be disdainful of something that's produced, but you've got to be honest about where you know it from, where your thought is, what motivates your thinking. You've got to speak from a standpoint, which is a term that I learned from feminist epistemologies. And I think it's a very important concept for using when we write about popular culture.
You've made it really clear in some of your blog entries that you have a deep and abiding passion for popular culture. Could you talk a little bit about your own fandom?
Well, where to start? I could go all the way back to elementary school when I was reading Mad Magazine and Famous Monsters of Filmland and staying up late to watch silent movies on PBS, and forward to my years in Star Trek fandom. I'm someone who has a batholith, a Klingon battle sword in my living room, and and from all the way forward, that I had been part of a fan community that had been really passionate, really articulate critics of popular culture who had done really thorough rethinkings, critiques, remakings of popular culture. And then I went off to graduate school, and the theory I was being read suggested we were dupes of the media, that we were simply subject positions created by ideological discourses. And I was very frustrated by the lack of acknowledgement of the active nature of consuming popular culture. And the things that I took for granted when I was hanging out with my fan friends were totally alien to the theoretical discussions we were having in graduate school. And so it's taken me a long time to figure out a way to bridge between those two perspectives. But when people say, what are you a fan of? To me, it's like asking a punk rocker, what are you a punk of? That is, to me, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of engaging media. For me, it means that if I get excited about a piece of media, I tend to watch everything. I tend to store up content and watch it systematically, back to back. It's not clear that fans consume any more media than the general population, but they consume it more selectively, more actively, and more creatively. For me, it's sort of a way of speculating around the content. And an essential part of my social life and identity emerges from the conversations I have about the media that I consume. And for me, it's a license to playfully engage and stretch the borders of the text that I read. Fans are active rewriters, not simply rereaders of media content, whether it's in the videos they produce or songs they write or plays they stage, or most commonly at this point, I guess, writing fan fiction about those works. So I've been a fan fiction writer. I've played the part of Dumbledore on a fan podcast in the Harry Potter world. I walk the walk and don't just talk the talk as far as fandom's concerned. But for me, it's a lifestyle. It's a kind of subcultural identity that's very central to who I am. And so it's not about my relation to a particular text. It's about the way I've related to media content since I was 6.
I've seen a picture of you with your Klingon weapon, and it looks very impressive indeed. Have you always been able to successfully integrate your status as a fan into your academic approach to your career, or it seems as though you're taking a trajectory that binds those two together more and more?
I mean, it's something I've always struggled to do. I think it's become easier to do as more and more academics have come out of the closet as fans and as we've developed infrastructures of support. It's easier for younger academics to write in this way about popular culture, in part because of struggles we've been fighting for the last 20 years. And I'm excited by something like the launch of the Organization for Transformative Works, which is an organization that's bringing together fan academics to create their own journal about fan studies and cult media, that just launched its first issue, that's bringing together lawyers who are fans to develop a legal defense against fans who may be subject to cease and desist letters, that is archiving the history of fandom, building platforms for fans to share with among themselves media they produced without having to go through commercial platforms. It's a really exciting moment for fan studies, and there's so many blogs and live journals that have been launched in recent years by fans that it's much easier now to not only stake some space around being an ACA fan, but to connect with other people across a variety of fields. That fan studies is really a large interdisciplinary movement right now that's connecting lots of different researchers around the world.
The name of that was the Organization for Transformational Works?
Transformative Works.
Transformative
Works is a legal term, and it's a defense against claims of plagiarism or copyright infringement to argue that the work has been in some meaningful way transformed. And so what they're arguing is that fan culture by definition is transformative, that even a fan story that's written fairly sympathetically to the original text is also an act of criticism, one that mobilizes evidence, references lines and specific scenes and background of characters to support its argument. And so it's part of a legal defense that's starting to emerge that says this is not simply appropriation or plagiarism, but it's the creative transformation of the material, the raw materials provided by popular culture.
This has been a hot issue in Harry Potter, hasn't it, recently? I believe there have been a number of lawsuits to do with derivative works that deal with some aspect of the Harry Potter novels.
Yeah, the most famous case is the Harry Potter Lexicon case. This was a reference work created by fans to sort of a concordance of the world of Harry Potter, the world of Hogwarts. It had existed on the web fine and it received praise from J.K. Rowling, but when they sought to publish it as a commercial book, she struck back. She felt very threatened by the presence of this book on the marketplace, in part because she's often talked of developing her own encyclopedia of wizard lore. Now, I think this is a confusion of genre because what she's talked about is using the encyclopedic form to expand the world of Harry Potter, much the way J.K. Rowling's later writing, or J.R.R. Tolkien's later writings expanded the world of Lord of the Rings. Fans would clearly buy any new work on Hogwarts created by J.K. Rowling. But it's hard to imagine that a concordance, a scholarly work, would interfere with that. But unfortunately, the courts ruled in J.K. Rowling's favor in a decision which I think threatens not just fair use for grassroots media producers and fans, but also fair use for academics. Any number of reference works that we might create that are tied to a literary source might be prohibited if the logic of that case carried forward.
That's a great argument for the need for that kind of organization. I understand the principle. You created the Comparative Media Studies program at MIT. Can you explain the central vision of that program?
Well, at the core of it, the key of it is the word comparative. We wanted to sort of redesign what media studies would look like for the 21st century. And we wanted to sort of expand in a variety of directions. We felt like media studies had been boxed in by medium-specific approaches. That film studies was over here, some departments had television studies or photography studies, but no department dealt fully with the full range of media. That broadcast and print journalism were taught separately, that advertising and marketing were being taught separately. There wasn't an integrated approach to media studies in the American context. And so we wanted to create a program that would encourage people to think across media in a moment when media are increasingly converging, to think across national borders in a moment media was increasingly globalized, to think across historical periods and provide the context for the present moment of media change, to expand the dialogue to combine theory and practice in ways that we call applied humanities, and to finally break down the wall between the ivory tower and the other spaces in our society where they're discussing media change. And so that's all part of the vision, and it's part of what we're coming up on our 10th anniversary as a program. And I think we've been able to put a lot of those goals into practice through the courses we teach and the research we're involved with and the public outreach and conferences we run, we podcast and blogs. We've really been trying to be a model for how a media studies program might engage a larger public in the discussions of theory and practice, shaping a moment of profound and prolonged media transition.
Is it something that MIT students can major in or specialize in, or is it an add-on to another academic discipline?
On the undergraduate level, we have a major, and it is the largest major in the humanities at MIT. On the graduate level, we have a master's program. We have about 20 master's students in residence at any point in time. We don't yet have a PhD program. It's something we've been fighting to achieve, but it's so far eluded our grasp. But we're able to have a pretty active master's and undergraduate program.
I think it's worth revisiting your use of the term applied humanities. I was tickled when I read that in your materials. As you say, we have applied physics, applied math, applied all sorts of other disciplines. So you've coined this term applied humanities. Can you explain a little more?
Well, I mean, the idea of applied humanities is that the things we know about culture and society matter at a moment when the world around us is undergoing profound media change. And so behind that is the idea that we bring together people in the field who are struggling with issues, and we teach our students how to brainstorm, how to engage productively, how to make a difference in the world. When we got ready to launch the Comparative Media Studies program, I went around the country and I talked to about 60 different organizations, businesses, nonprofits, and we said, what would you value in a humanities graduate, and what do you see the limits of humanities education? And they all said more or less the same things, that the value of humanities education, creativity, a broad range of knowledge, the ability to be articulate about your ideas. The challenges, they said, were leadership, team experience, problem solving, brainstorming, project completion, communication skills. Those are very damning lists when you're looking at the potentials of moving students with humanities degrees into spaces other than PhD programs and academic pipelines. We, by design, wanted to create a program where only about 40% of our students went on to get PhDs and became academics, and the rest entered into a variety of jobs: ed tech, advertising, the games industry, media literacy programs, policy think tanks, journalism, arts curatorships. All of these are jobs that media-trained people can inhabit and should inhabit if we're going to make a difference in the world. And so to train those people, we wanted to then have our students work not as teaching assistants, but as research assistants to work on research projects which had real-world applications, whether it's consulting with media companies about their policies toward their consumers, or designing curricular materials to support new media literacy education, developing games that will go out in the marketplace and potentially sort of become an incubator for creative new ideas. Think about the future of politics and activism and journalism, and create projects that would go out and work and be in communities and make a difference in people's lives. So we're constantly trying to build that bridge between the theoretical work we do in our classes and the applied work we do through our research. And it's a very integrated approach to learning that enables students to prepare for those next steps.
It must make them eminently employable when they do come out of this program. Do they do well?
Yeah, one of the early backers of the program said we should train students for jobs that don't have names yet. And that's really what we've been doing. And in fact, we're seeing companies and organizations create jobs, categories they've never had before, just to hire students out of our program. And our students are using their blogs to get visibility well before they graduate. So we've had a number of students who created blogs about their thesis research, threw it out in the world, and began to get inquiries before they even went on the job market because their writings were having an impact on the industries or the organizations, the nonprofit groups that they were studying and writing about.
What a great passport into the real world after school. I wanted to ask you about one of the research initiatives that have grown out of the program. It shares some key vocabulary with the title of your most recent book. It's the Convergence Culture Consortium, and the title of your book is also Convergence Culture. Could you explain exactly what you mean by convergence culture?
Well, when we often talk about the word convergence, when the industry talks about it, they're usually talking about technological convergence. That is, which black box will all the media flow through? Will it be the set-top box on your TV set? Will it be your iPhone? Will there be some other device that we integrate media technologies through? But what I'm arguing in the book is that, in fact, we're a good ways away from having total technological convergence, and we may never reach that point. But what we're seeing is the integration of the cultural systems around media, so that every story, idea, sound, image travels across the maximum number of media platforms in a coordinated and integrated way, and that travel is shaped as much by decisions made in teenagers' bedrooms as decisions made in corporate boardrooms. That young people taking media in their own hands and doing with it what they want are part of a process which is spreading the content of media. But so are the process of media concentration, of integrated companies that are trying to establish touch points for their brands across all media channels. What we're seeing is a moment where everyone sort of sees that our culture is going to become more participatory, but there's not a general agreement about the terms of participation. I quote in the book Grant McCracken, an anthropologist, who says that in the future, companies will have every reason to restrict access to their intellectual property legally and every economic reason to open them up. And so what we wanted to do was build a dialogue with industry, go out and educate them about the values and concerns of their consumers, create a space where we provide feedback on policies they were developing that affected the flow of media and grassroots creativity, participatory culture, the fan communities I come from, be an advocate for fans and industry, and in return help industry think through some vexing problems. That far from the sort of flowcharts we see where it looks like there's total organization within these companies, they're large dysfunctional families. The creative division, the legal division, the marketing division fundamentally disagree about the direction they want, the policies they want for the public. And so we wanted to be a think tank which helped those companies work through those challenges. One of the things we do on the most public level, we have a blog, the Convergence Culture Consortium blog, but we also have the Futures of Entertainment Conference, which is coming up in November, which this will be the third year we've done it, and it brings together leaders from across the entertainment industries for serious and substantive discussions about the directions our culture are going, conversations that wouldn't take place anyplace else.
What kind of a response are you having from the folks you're talking to in the industry?
I think very positive. I think they're eager to better understand the context. Clearly their motives are different from my motives. We're trying to get to a common ground and find a common ground. There's a lot of missteps and misunderstandings along the way, but I think there's an openness to hear, and they value what we do because we'll say things to them that no one else in their company will say, that we're being paid in part to bite the hand that feeds us and to force them to examine some of their core preconceptions and push them to the next level.
Do you see examples where the input from you and the consortium have already had an influence on how they're doing things?
We're definitely seeing that. We work with companies like MTV and Turner, both of which have, with MTV, we've sort of been in a tug-of-war for their soul where YouTube's concerned, right? That early on we pushed and MTV jumped in to be one of the first to allow free circulation of their contents via YouTube. When it was bought by Google, Viacom, the parent company, has now declared war on YouTube and is the center of a legal suit, but we're still working behind the scenes to try to get MTV at least to understand why it's in their best interest, to loosen control rather than tighten it. But it's a push-pull at the present time. The companies are being shoved in many different directions as they work through a moment of transition that has a huge impact on their future. But we at least have a seat at the table, and spoke the other week to about 65, 70 of the key executives at MTV in Times Square, and had some really good discussions of the value of spreadable content at a moment, when the parent company is trying to lock down its content as much as possible.
There's a lot at stake, billions of dollars at stake, I would think.
Yeah, it's a huge risk proposition, and it may not even be, MTV, I think, probably would move in that direction. I think they're struggling with some of the other economic pressures on them, both the larger conglomerate they're part of, the affiliates' expectation when they buy content from a cable company that they have exclusive right for it in this particular market. It's a very complicated question.
I have to switch topics a little to make sure that we spend a bit of time talking about the convergence culture, digital networking sites, and the importance of all of that in this year's election, such a critical election. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of this generation, the new generation of voters, having access to YouTube and various other technologies? How is the explosion of networking sites and other forms of digital technology going to influence this new generation of voters?
Well, I think we're seeing plenty of signs. It's still a day or two early to find out exactly what the outcome is. But if patterns of voting in primary season and in early voting patterns hold, young people are going to vote in this election in a way that they haven't since the 18-year-olds got the right to vote. That is, we saw during the primaries that in some states more young people voted than senior citizens, which is really unheard of in the history of American politics. And a large part of it is, of course, a particular campaign, the Obama campaign, which has really embraced new media platforms in very powerful ways. Coming out of a community organizing background, Obama understood bottom-up media, grassroots communication strategies, the value of letting the public participate in decisions that affected them, and those principles carry through across the board in terms of the strategies of the Obama campaign. They also understood in a way that no candidate has before, I think, that a candidate runs across all media platforms. So I've called Obama the man for all platforms, and it's really true that everything from mobile phones to putting advertisements in video games, the campaign has been out front in testing new technologies, and there's been a rapid innovation cycle that takes place. And he's running against a man who doesn't use email at all, and whose staff seems to be largely blind to the potentials of new media, makes the contrast that much more striking. This is a contrast on the order of Kennedy-Nixon in the 1960s, where Kennedy's people understood television far better than Nixon's people did, and it made a huge difference. So if we think about the social network sites, that may be one of the most powerful parts of the Obama campaign. If you think about it traditionally, a website for a candidate, the voters connect to the campaign, information is sent to them. If you think about how Facebook works, the candidate is one node in a vast interconnected network of contacts. There's a whole grid of social connections surrounding the candidate. And the voters are as connected to each other as they are to the campaign, which means, first of all, that they can rapidly deploy, organize on the ground in all kinds of configurations, do their own activities quickly and easily. So a lot of the stuff around the Obama campaign isn't controlled by the campaign at all. It's organized by the public. But secondly, it means win or lose, you can swap Obama out, put another progressive candidate or progressive cause in the center of the network, and you have a movement that continues and it builds the basis for progressive politics for the future. But also, should Obama be elected president, he's got the basis of a grassroots organization that if he needs to rally the public in response to blockages in Congress, say, he can mobilize it almost overnight to have massive letter writing going on in support of the legislation that he's proposing.
So this is likely to be different from anything else we've seen.
It's going to change. It'll change the complexion of politics, and really does form the basis not just for progressive victories in this election cycle, but for sort of strengthening the progressive movement for elections to come.
Another really surprising element of this year's campaign has been parody and the importance of parody and the way everyone has been eager to see the latest parody. In the title of your talk, you make a reference to the talking snowman. Can you explain that piece?
Yeah, the talking snowman surfaced very early in the campaign in the era at the CNN YouTube debates, which was an interesting collaboration between cable television and digital media. There was a snowman who appeared and asked the Democratic candidates about global warming. And afterwards, he became the focal point of the debates about the debates and how people perceived it. Well, the story is really interesting. The snowman was created by two high school-age kids in Minneapolis. They'd originally created him as a spoof video for the web. Then they repurposed the footage and created the snowman video. They were inspired by Mr. Bill, who had himself appeared originally as user-generated content on the original season of Saturday Night Live. That it had been an amateur video. Saturday Night Live had liked it so much they commissioned the amateur to produce 20 more such videos that ran through several seasons of Saturday Night Live. He was a poster child, in a sense, for early phases of participatory culture. So these young men were inspired by that, but they also were inspired by the fact that Mr. Bill's producer had recently become an environmental activist, had brought Mr. Bill out of retirement and was using him as a mouthpiece for concern with the wetlands of Louisiana and Mississippi. So that these young men took that inspiration, built a video, and became part of the political struggle. Mitt Romney allegedly was not going to participate in the Republican YouTube debate, claiming it was undignified for a candidate to debate a snowman. And so they produced a series of videos critiquing Mitt Romney as a candidate that allowed them to surf the visibility and interest in the snowman post the election. So they moved from being kids playing around with claymation to create a video that was just pure spoof to increasingly being tied into the blogosphere, the podcast world, understanding how to use popular culture for political activism. So they're a wonderful example of the move from participatory culture to participatory democracy.
I hate to say that we're running out of time. Before we have to close, I wanted to ask you if you can foresee where your research is going to take you from here.
Well, probably in many directions. But the one we're focused on right now is the concept of spreadable media, sort of critiquing of the idea of viral media, which sort of starts from the assumption that media makers infect us and that we're passive drivers of content. Going back to the election content, these spoof videos, people consciously chose to transmit them from one place to the other. Sometimes in support of the message originally intended, sometimes passing along and saying, you never believe what these idiots are saying now. But either way, we're active participants in the circulation of media, and our circulation of media is creating a lot of the worth and value of media content at the present time. So that's the direction we're going to be studying in the future.
You've got no lack of material.
No shortage whatsoever.
Henry, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate this. I wish we'd had twice as much time.
Great fun.
We've been speaking with Henry Jenkins, Director of the Comparative Media Studies program at MIT. Thank you for watching.